Happy late October Thursday to everyone. Welcome to Tech Tips Live. This is Phil Mason. I've got Ian on with me, and we look forward to another great session looking at data going in and out. And we also, as we keep working here with Ring Central a little bit more, we try out a few more things. So we're going to do a couple polls today. So those of you in attendance, you're going to have to stay on your toes as I'm going to have a couple interactive questions. So our first one here today, we, for many years, used WebEx, and then we changed to Ring Central. And so I'm going to throw up here on the screen, hopefully you all are seeing a poll come up, and just click one of those if you have a preference. All right, getting some responses in. Looks like at this point everybody said, these webinar things are all kind of the same. And I wasn't necessarily worried, just wanted to get a little feedback. Sometimes you never quite know how something is working out. So thank you all for participating. We'll have a couple more questions here coming up when we get closer to our topic. So as I noted today, Ian Harris is with me. You want to say hello today, Ian?
Hello, hello.
All right. Thanks a lot. Ian will be doing the driving for us. Again, he is one of our implementation specialists, and we'll be sharing some more information today about some of the best ways to get data in and out of GainSeeker. So, classic lineup here. I'm doing a little opening. Ian will take things, then we'll have some questions and answers at the end. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Ian. As we've talked about, we have GainSeeker in the middle, and today it's not so much user input and machine input, it's more input and output to and between software systems. And so Ian's going to talk about that a little bit and some of the important reminders and things of the best way to do that. So I've got a couple more questions for you here. And thinking about what we're interested in knowing a little bit more about as we go into our session here is, how much are you using other apps, other applications along with GainSeeker? And then maybe I've got a list of a few applications and we're just curious to see what people are using. So here's another couple questions. So if you'd take a minute, answer these for us, that would be fantastic. Not seeing anybody responding. Are you folks? Oh, here they come all of a sudden. Boom. All right, great. Give a few more seconds here. Some of the rest of you on the call would respond. Give us a little bit more information. Again, we have a small sample size here. So it looks like so far of the small sample size we've got here, majority of you, it's about a 75-25, 3/4 of the time you're using GainSeeker, but there are other times that you use the other applications. We had late comer here who's not using GainSeeker as much, using some other applications more. And then what applications are people using? And people could select multiples here. So using Excel most commonly, and we know that is the case and have had those integrations built in for a long time. Minitab, another very popular analysis tool out there. ClickView and Tableau are a couple that we have run into recently, And again, there we've got one in the Power BI. I'm guessing, I think Andy Eller was on it. Andy finally saw that there. And that's another common one that people use in Google Sheets. Not as common perhaps in the corporate world, but for many of us, it's a tool that's available as well. All right, very interesting. That's helpful to kind of see what people are using. Oh, there, I suppose I probably may have to end it for all of you to see it. There we go. So there's our, there, now you can see it. Okay. So I'm learning with this new platform as well. Okay, got a message, got a chat, having trouble seeing the polls. So that's good to know. Again, as we try and work with a new platform, that's helpful to see some of that. Yes, IT didn't open some ports, but not all of them. Excellent. All right, I'll stop blabbering. I'll turn it over, Ian. You ready to take this away and give people some more ideas about getting data in and out of the system?
Absolutely.
I guess before Ian goes, I will say that we have, if you have questions, you have the Q&A again at the bottom of your screen. And if you put a question in there, we will get to those at the end, or I'll throw them in as we're going as well. So do not hesitate. Don't use the chat feature here, but use the Q&A. That's a good place to do it. We can keep track of what we've answered and what we haven't. Now I'll shut up, and Ian, you can go ahead and take it away.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Phil. That polling tool is pretty cool. So when we talk about getting data into and out of GainSeeker, most of the time we're talking about one of two things: either bringing standards in or exporting those, or bringing actual raw data or measurement data. So this would be, what we're getting from the machines, whatever your operators are putting in. To do this, we've got a few different sort of tool sets. So that's what's under common tools. They're located in different areas in GainSeeker. So some of those tools are located in GainSeeker Utility and some in GainSeeker Charts, which are two applications we're all probably familiar with. And then if you want to do automation, we have Python that can really help with that. It's a fairly powerful way of doing it, and it's very discerning. So we're going to go through and do some importing and exporting of standards, because honestly, the best way to talk about this is just to show how it works. So we're going to be using the ImportExport tool for standards, and then I will briefly go over duplicate and copy. I'm not going to spend too much time on those because it's self-explanatory. And then we'll do sort of the same thing for data, and that's when we're going to get into what you can do in GainSeeker charts. So we'll start off with mass data import export, and then see what we can do at kind of a finer level, where you can send a specific chart or a specific table and also import into GainSeeker from the clipboard if you've copied something out of Excel. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about some automation, and this is going to be very high level. I'm just going to briefly go over it because, again, this usually requires Python coding, and I'm not going to do any actual coding here. But this is what you would be using if you had, say, a machine that put out CSVs or Excel files, and you wanted to be able to automatically import that data into GainSeeker. So we'll go over what you need, which basically it comes down to traceability. That's what's required, since that you understand what your traceability is going to be. And you do that by figuring out what kinds of things are going to affect your process and what kinds of things you want in your reporting. So this could be, anything from machine name to shift operator, stuff like that. And also you want to make sure that your traceability is aligned between the machine that's putting out these CSVs and the rest of GainSeeker. So if you have an operator list, you don't want one list to only be initials and the other list to be full names. You want them to match. And then we'll go over really quickly basic requirements, which I guess I'll just do now, which are understanding the data source file, which basically means knowing what the Excel file looks like or what the CSV looks like, and making sure that it can be accessed by GainSeeker. and then we'll answer questions after that. So I'm going to go ahead and end this slideshow temporarily and just go through this using actual GainSeeker. So the first one we're going to do is importing and exporting standards. And I'm assuming everybody can still see my screen. I don't actually see an outline on it anymore.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, good. So we're going to go through the standards first, starting with GainSeeker utility, which I'm just going to access through the Launchpad. And then the standards utility, which is sort of middle left here. Standards utility has SPC and DMS tabs. I'll be sticking in SPC, but this applies for both. So the two most important things here are the import and export. I'll start with the export. And this is just using the tour data set that we have. So not real data, basically. And this is a fairly simple process. These are all going to be really simple. Once you've clicked the button, you just select which standards you want to export or standards. You can do that by control clicking to get different individual ones, or if you want a whole group, you can shift click to get a whole group. So I'll just pick these two temps because that's easy. And I think I was doing this earlier, so I'll go ahead and just delete all of these. And then I will export them. So I'll go ahead and put them in that folder, this Tech Tips Live folder, and I will call them, standard. This is a bad naming convention, but there we go. So when you export standards using this utility, it doesn't actually change anything inside of GainSeeker. So if I go into GainSeeker charts and I look at this piece right here, it still exists. I can still pull up a chart just like normal. But if I were to delete those standards, so I'll go ahead and do that by hitting delete range here and selecting those two temp standards. And I'll say standard records only. When you delete things, you want to make sure you don't delete the data on accident. So I'll go ahead and just delete the standards, and those are now gone. Now if I go into charts, predictably, they're not there. So I can't pull those charts up using charts. But of course, the other thing you can do is import. So I will just go ahead and import the exact same standards back in. Again, maybe don't name your standards export standards. And let's see, there are 2 inserted or updated, none skipped, and none failed. So at this point, if I go into GainSeeker charts, there they are. And this temp2 standard is the one I pulled up before, and as you can see, the data is still there. So this is a good tool. The standard utility import and export is a good tool to use for disaster recovery. If you end up losing everything, as long as you've got a relatively recent file with all your standards in it, it's trivial to set it back up again. It's also trivial to move your standards from one plant or one configuration to another, which leads me to this here. So duplicate and copy to configuration. I can spend a lot of time here because they're self-explanatory, but they do kind of fit the export. So duplicates, really cool actually, because instead of retyping a whole name, you can select the standard you want to duplicate and then replace. So I want to replace this 2 with the 3, so I'll do a space 2 and replace it with a space 3, or whatever. And then it'll create a standard that has that name. And I'm going to delete that standard because I don't actually need it. So that's basically it for the standard import and export. But what about data? So I'm going to start with this giant import export data button here. And I will go in the same order. Once again, you'll notice there's SPC and DMS, and I'm going to stick in SPC. And I'll go ahead and export this data first. So when you click on this, it'll ask you to name the file first. You can rename this, so I'm just going to leave it with that default name, because once you're into this export data utility window here, on the right-hand side, there's a set export file name button, and you can change the name of the file there. And so I'll just pick on the same 2 standards again, and I'll select both of them. And this window acts a lot like other windows with which you are probably familiar. So there's a date range that you can choose here. It's the same window as you get in charts. And there's filters, which work exactly the same way as they do in charts. So you could pick only cavity 1 or 2 or multiple filters if you want to combine them. I'm just going to leave it set to all data and all dates. And I'll go ahead and click this delete data during export. If you don't click this, then when you export the data, it will just copy it out. If you do click it, it will try to delete it. There's a show status button here in the lower right that tells you the total number of records that are going to be exported, and then it gives you how many records will be exported for each part number you selected or each standard. And I will go ahead and export those. So what is this? 123501 temps. So there we go. And now I'll give you this, are you sure you really want to do this though window? And I'll go ahead and say yes. And now it will delete everything. So all of the data for the standards is gone, but the standards are still there. So now if I go into charts and I try to pull up a chart for say temp 2, there isn't one because there's no data in GainSeeker anymore for that. So the easiest way to fix that, just like before, is using this import button. And I just left it with its default name. So go ahead and open that. I will select everything. Once again, you can select a date range if you want to. I'm just going to leave it like it is. I always click this show status button just as kind of a final check to make sure everything looks the way I expect it to look. And it does, so I'll click import. It'll import, and we'll be done. And now, of course, if you go into GainSeeker charts, that data will be back. And this actually leads me directly into GainSeeker charts. So this is the next tool set for importing and exporting data. And I'm going to make this slightly smaller. Instead of doing 1,000 pieces, or 1,000 records, I'll just do 100 records here. So this is the 100 most recent records for this part number. So exporting data can be done in a handful of ways. Mostly what you're probably going to do is right-click on your chart and go to Send To. It'll open this context menu here, and you can send to any of these things. These will almost always appear on your systems, and then the stuff under here will be if you have that application. So for instance, I don't have Minitab on my computer, so it's not here, but I do have Excel and Word and PowerPoint. Email's a pretty popular one, so it opened on the wrong window, but it does exactly what it seems like it should do. It opens an email, puts the image in there, and a table, and attaches the image. So the next thing that you can do, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this as a data table here, is you can send this stuff to Excel. So I will send this to Excel real quick, the same way, right-clicking and going to Excel, which is right here. When you do this, if you're not used to seeing Excel kind of throw a fit with date times here, it just means that if you see those pound signs, it just means that that stuff's a little smaller than it should be. One moment. All right. So this is a really great and easy way to distribute this stuff to people who are used to reading Excel documents. Now, I think I actually have 2 of these open. I do, and they're exactly the same. So I'll go ahead and get rid of that. And I'm going to now delete this data. So as a real quick side note here, this is why you should be controlling your security inside GainSeeker, because from charts, you can right-click anywhere and go to delete range and select everything and just get rid of it. And it will go away immediately after asking if you're sure one time. And it also redraws this table, so it's kind of difficult to see that it did that. But if I bring this down here, you can see that my data 1 for Excel here is 3465155, and Up here it's 348, 56, 50. So these are different data sets now because I've obviously taken that data out. So I'm just going to treat this Excel file like it came from somewhere else, and I want to get this data into GainSeeker. So let's say that I had another program that generated this Excel file. How would I get this into GainSeeker? And the easiest way, I think, is to just select all of your data and just copy it. And then in GainSeeker charts, go to File, External, and this is SPC data, so I'll do copied from clipboard SPC, and it brought all that stuff in. So GainSeeker isn't going to know right away what column is what traceability, so you're going to have to tell it. Like, I know that this is, that this is the part number here, and I know that this is the date time, and I know that this is data. Some of the columns you're not going to have a column header for because that's not actually traceability. So this column, for instance, is the X bar, and this one right here is the moving range, and these are calculated, so you can't have traceability. So you would have to drag your traceability into every column header. The easier way to do that is when you are collecting your data, just also collect the columns and make that part of your selection. And then just follow the exact same instructions. And now you'll see it auto-fills all this stuff. These two things are not going to get imported because they don't need to be. It will automatically detect how this stuff is delimited, tab, comma, etc. And once you click OK here, from this point on, GainSeeker treats what you just put into it like any other thing it got out of the database. So I can pick a control chart, and it'll show me a control chart. And if I look at this other control chart, you'll notice that they're different because they're both, like, this is the most recent 100 pieces of data in the database, and this stuff isn't currently in the database, it's just from the clipboard. So what if you want to get this into GainSeeker? And that's actually really easy too. As long as you've got the correct one selected, just go to File, External Data, Save, and say yes. And it's done. And so now if I go to this, this chart of the 100 most recent data points, and I just refresh it, you'll notice it exactly matches this one. So I've taken this data out of GainSeeker and put it back into GainSeeker with no actual loss. Everything about it's exactly the same. And of course, I can do exactly what I could do before: send it email, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, however you need to get it out there. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation back up again.
Okay, yeah, we're about 5 minutes, 25 after, so you crank through it pretty good there, Ian.
Yeah, that took a bit longer than I thought it was going to, so I apologize for that. Why is it not starting? There we go. All right. So just to briefly go over automation again, this is basically what you get. Again, if you have like a machine that is going to be spitting out CSVs pretty regularly, and you want to know what it's doing, and you want to automate that to reduce the number of errors that are going to be getting into your system. So the kinds of things that you need to know if you want to import this are what's supposed to be in the file. So what the columns and rows are going to look like in, say it's an Excel file, in that file. And then you're going to want to know what your traceability are. So your different traceabilities are going to be how you actually chart it, how you are analyzing it later, and how GainSeeker does that. Really important to make sure that the data that you put in is valid, even if it's uncomfortable. So if it points out that there's a problem in your process, as long as the data is valid data, you still want it to get in there. So don't exclude data just because you don't like what it says. And finally, just really quickly going over at a high level how you would set this up. There are basically 3 steps. The first one is you create a Python script to do this importing. You want to make sure that it error catches. So if there's a problem with let's say the machine accidentally generates a bad file one day, it'll catch those errors instead of causing the script to hang. And you might seriously consider having the Python script email somebody if that happens. And the help documentation has a lot of information on Python commands and reading from CSVs and Excel files. Then the second thing you would do is use console, you'd create a GS console icon to launch the script. You'd create this with .launch. And then once you've done that, you just create a scheduled task on the server that targets that console application. And you can just have that run every hour, 15 minutes, whatever you need. And I'll go ahead and move over to this next slide.
Okay.
So these are both fairly quick. So the first one, can GainSeeker be directly connected to my machine, whatever your machine happens to be? Typically, GainSeeker has a handful of ways for you to put data in. The recommended way of putting data into GainSeeker is using the GUI. If you want to put it in more directly, we recommend using the built-in Python commands because those do the same behind-the-scenes work that the GUI does. When GainSeeker puts stuff into the database, it fills in certain columns that you might not expect it to. So letting GainSeeker take care of that is recommended. GainSeeker just uses a SQL Server database usually, or Oracle, whatever. So you can, if you really want to, directly put data in, but we highly recommend if you need that kind of control, just using Python to do it. And the how can I archive data question, it really goes back to the mass import and export. The best way to do that is to select everything that you want to archive and just export all of it. And then put that either into a configuration or onto a secure storage server, something like that. And once you've verified that it's out of your system, at that point, go ahead and delete it.
I mean, the beauty there of putting it in another configuration is it still is somewhat live. It's not live in your production database, but it's right there. And just with a couple clicks, you can be in that archive and look at data, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, Ian, you took us around the horn there. Hopefully people saw some new things. You know, it's gone are the days. I can remember the old days of doing imports and boy, you click and drag and all that. We've made it so much easier, and the self-identifying on columns, fantastic stuff there.
Yeah, the ability to read from the clipboard from Excel like that is huge.
Yep.
It's actually a lot of fun.
For sure, for sure. All right. Well, anyone else have any other questions out there? We haven't gotten any at this juncture. I want to give just a couple minutes here. Next month, we will actually here, go ahead and go to the next slide while we wait and see if anybody else has any other questions. So November 19th is our next Tech Tips Live, and a little bit what Ian talked about. We'll dig into a little more detail of you're connecting a new device. What do you need to know? How do you do that? And whether that's a gauge with an RS-232 or like Ian was talking about, some kind of a PLC or a device that's throwing out a file. You know, what are some of the steps you'll go through to do that and how you might do that yourself? And obviously we're there to help you with those things, and we provide those kinds of services, but we also want to equip all of you to do that as well. So that will be next month, and then December will be for GainSeeker 9.4, the introduction of that as we get that new version out. So I'm not seeing any other questions at this juncture, so thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Ian, for taking us through getting data in and out of GainSeeker. Hope you all have a great rest of the week. Stay safe out there. Enjoy Halloween, and we'll catch up with you all in November. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.